I hope you enjoy this LifeLine Master Series with Gregg Braden as much as I have. Gregg and I share intimate details of what has helped him to create a practice, what has been his defining moments in his life so that he can show up in alignment with his calling, his purpose. So beautiful, so awesome. Enjoy. With love and gratitude. Hey, Gregg, welcome to the LifeLine Master Series interview, and thank you for especially going the extra effort to make this happen today on a weekend where I know that you're in the process of writing another awesome book, and you have so many things that are happening in your world that you're taking time to be a part of this Master Series. I really appreciate it.
Dr. Darren, my brother, I'm honored to be here with you. What our audience doesn't know is we've been working with technology for about the last 30 minutes to bring this to them. I am working on a book, and I can't tell you what it's about, you know? So you know what they say, if I could tell you, but then you know what would have to happen, so.
Yeah, and we don't want that. But what I would love for you to share is, because this is a master series, and so this is all about connecting with people that are showing up in the world and choosing to literally show up and live a life of purpose and calling, make a difference in other people's lives by living true to what your authentic self is. And I would love for you to actually share how you jimmy-rigged your computer to make this interview happen, because it was masterful. And just so people can appreciate the intention and the vibration that is present in this interview.
All right, so this is Darren and Gregg unplugged behind the scenes. What did it take to make this interview? We're using a piece of software and a camera that my home office computer does not support for whatever reason. So everything is loaded onto a small iPad that is sitting on top of a stack of books. The Torah is the foundation book. It's a nice hardback Torah. We've got some Dr. Darren Weissman books in there. We've got a number of copies of Gregg Braden's books. We've got The Turning Point and The Divine Matrix and Fractal Time in here. And when we got to the top, the iPad wouldn't set up right. So we've got a massive dancing Shiva holding on one side and a mysterious artifact from Athens, Greece. It's a code that has never been deciphered that is up on a little stand supporting the back of the iPad. So we're surrounded by mystery and the deepest mysteries of our existence. And I think that's a beautiful setting for where we're going to go today, Darren.
It is. Well, everybody just take a deep breath in and enjoy this incredible ride that we're about to take. And Gregg, I've known you before I knew you, because I had been studying your work and inspired by you in the amazing impact and the scientific view that you have taken towards consciousness and the mind and the heart. And when we first met in Toronto some years back at Hey House I Can Do It, I said to my wife, Sarit, I said, "Oh my God, that's Gregg Braden." And she's like, "Well, go up and say hi." I'm like, I am so excited. And I'm so blessed to, that not only that we're colleagues, but we've developed such a dear friendship. And I hold it so close to my heart, and so honored. And the vision and the intention behind this Master Series is to share with people what are ways that Gregg Braden shows up in life, practices what he preaches, so that you can not only live to your own fullest potential, but you can support the people that you love and that you care about. What's a day in the life of Gregg Braden look like?
Wow. So we'll start with the easy questions first. For me, Darren, I firmly believe that we're in this world not only for ourselves, but for one another, and to be in the presence of one another. the deepest gift, the deepest mystery that we can honor within ourselves. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is give thanks. First, because I woke up. We take it for granted, but who knows? And the beauty that surrounds me, as you know, we live in the high desert of northern New Mexico. It was by choice. I chose to live where we do. It's not convenient, but I am surrounded by the beauty. And I think beauty is one of the most powerful principles in our lives. And the native traditions that I'm surrounded with here in this part of the world, beauty is actually viewed as a force of nature. In physics, we identify four forces: the electromagnetic force, the strong and the weak nuclear forces, and the force of gravity. Excuse me. And scientists recognize that in native traditions in the Four Corners area, there's a fifth force, and it is the force of beauty. It is present whether we recognize it or not. Our job is to seek it out in all things, in all relationships, in all experience, to seek that beauty out and embrace it in our lives. And we are changed in the presence of beauty. So my life has been powerfully moved by beauty in the past, and I consciously chose to live in a place where we are surrounded by that beauty. Mother Teresa was a master at doing precisely this. She would wake up in the morning with the Sisters of Charity in the streets of Calcutta, and they would go out at daybreak and they would walk through the streets, through the filth and the dung and the stench and the bodies that had been cast out by the families at night because they had illnesses so horrible the families didn't know what to do with them. And it's a caste they're called the untouchables. And they were left on the streets to die. Mother Teresa would go onto the streets looking for these people in the morning, and in the midst of the filth and the stench and the dung, she would find a daisy growing from a crack in the sidewalk on the streets of Calcutta. And in that daisy, she would find beauty. And so we're reminded that beauty exists everywhere. Our job is to seek it out and find it in the world and in our life's experiences. And there is beauty in every experience. So a lot of my, consciously and subconsciously, because it's been such a powerful part of my life for so long, I choose to seek the beauty in whatever it is that I'm doing and whatever it is that I find myself immersed in, even when it's the most difficult, is perhaps sometimes we find the greatest beauty. And then my question is, what can I give? What can I contribute? What can I offer? How can I serve in this circumstance? And I think I wrote about this in the book, Resilience from the Heart, formerly The Turning Point. The way the world is changing right now, and so many people are asking, what can we do? And in the past, we've been taught that we live in this world of separation. The false assumptions of science tell us, for 150 years, they've told us that we live separate from ourselves, separate from the world, and that nature, the fundamental rule of nature, is actually based in competition and conflict. That's what we've been taught. We've all been steeped consciously and subconsciously in that belief. And it shows up, Darren, it shows up subconsciously in our most intimate relationships. I've been with people, they say they're the most spiritually oriented people in the world. And they do all the meditations and they do all the yoga, and they claim that they have the mastery. And where they really get to see that mastery is in their own home, under their own roof, in the presence of their most intimate relationships, when those who know us best can say things consciously or subconsciously that go right to the core of our deepest hurts. And if we don't know that that's what's happening, we will lash out in the most primal way through our subconscious. And that will tell us how deeply steeped we are in this idea of competition and conflict. So that's the old idea. And in that way of living, we have been led to believe and ask in the world, whenever something happens, what's in it for me? What can I get? If I enter into this relationship or this job, or I say yes to this event, or I write this book, what's in it for me? That's the old way of thinking, but we don't live in that world. We live in the world of connection. And the best science of the 21st century is now telling us that we live in a world of nature based upon cooperation, not competition, of mutual aid, not conflict.
Mhm.
So I'm saying this is a preface. When I wake up in the morning, I've changed the question for myself, and I invite our viewers to do the same. Instead of saying, what's in it for me? What can I get from the world that exists? The new question within the understanding of the new science becomes, what can I give? What can I share? What can I offer? What can I contribute to the world that's emerging? So I ask myself that question many, many times every day, Darren. And when I find that my buttons are, and I do have my buttons pressed.
Everyone does, hey?
Yeah, maybe fewer times than in the past. But when I find that feeling inside, the tension or the resistance to something I'm being asked to do, or that someone has just confronted me with, my first question isn't how do I defend myself? It's what can I give? What can I share? What can I offer? In this circumstance, and what happens, what I found personally, is it opens my heart and it opens my mind to a greater possibility and moves me out of that defensive mode. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Well,
My day is surrounded by, I look for beauty and how I can best serve in the presence of that beauty.
I love that. And it's, as is said, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, and how we, right, and how we choose to see something. And, that concept of, when not understood and looked at as a conflict or something that's outside of ourselves, and we get triggered, and now we're a part of this reactive pattern, to have that attitude of gratitude, to be in this place. I have a similar thing where I wake up and I use a LifeLine connection, and I just go through a process of just becoming present. I make the same statement every morning, and I say, I have no idea what this day is going to bring me, but whatever comes my way, I'm going to embrace it with infinite love and gratitude. And it's, I really appreciate that, because life is full of lots of mysteries, as these books and different iconic things that are supporting your iPad right now are a mystery. There are mysteries every single day in our present world that challenge us. And, just building upon that, as you look at the concept of stress, and stress for people in our world, and a lot of professionals, is the scapegoat. It's because of stress, it's because of this, it's because of that this happened. I'd love to hear your what your perception of stress is. What does stress mean to Gregg Braden?
Sure, it's I can answer the question in a single sentence. It may take longer to flesh that out, but from my perspective, stress is the significance that I give to an event in my life. Whether it's an event that I'm experiencing personally, whether it's one that I'm witnessing that others are experiencing, it's not the event itself, it's the significance that I'm giving to what I'm experiencing. And that significance, that's where the action is for me. That's where the story begins. The significance is the product of my life history.
It's beautiful.
It's the product of the filters through which I have been conditioned consciously when I have chosen to later in my life. But a lot of it, Darren, I'm in my 60s now, and this is still subconsciously from my childhood, before I even knew what kind of an environment I was in. Those filters or those experiences became the filters through which I see the events of the world, and the significance I give to what I'm seeing is often based in those. I think it's, no secret to my audiences. You and I have talked about this. I come from a very dysfunctional family, an alcoholic family. My father was an alcoholic, and my mom, my brother, I have a younger brother, 4 years younger than I. We took the bad end of that deal, and I know many of our listeners have had very similar experiences. And a lot of the alcoholism is an escape, because the person who's experiencing that, in this case my father, his life was steeped in fear and lack of self-esteem. So rather than deal with that, it's much easier to anesthetize ourselves. So those kinds of patterns. So self-criticism is a very powerful pattern that comes from those things, that kind of an experience. Issues of self-esteem, affected my other family members, I think, to a little bit greater degree. But all of those things play into the way that I, in the past, have seen the events of the world and the events of my life. And as I became conscious that the way I was perceiving maybe wasn't the healthiest way, then that was my trigger, my path, through martial arts, through meditation, through yoga, to experience healthier ways to redefine my experience, to redefine those filters. So it's and it's an ongoing process. You know, you think you have it all pretty much healed, and what I've found is that there are layers of healing. It's very possible to heal on one layer, and then another event comes up in our lives, and you say, "Wow, why does that hurt so much?" And you realize it's because there's a whole new layer. It's like the leaves of an onion. You've heard the layers of an onion. People have said that a lot. You and I have said that. So it is an ongoing process. And I think a big part of the process is not to judge the process, not to judge it, the family or the history or the experience is right, wrong, good or bad. It is. And the question is now, what do we do with what is? And how do we create the healthiest outcome for ourselves? And do we choose to be defined by our path, or our past and our experience? Or do we recognize that's the foundation that we can move forward and we get to make our own choices and our own new filters? And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. I mean, because the experiences of our past, which are oftentimes shocking, whether it be a loss or a trauma on any given level, really do influence our thinking and influence our feelings and come up as this big word that we call stress and affect, you know, an outcome on a physical level, affect an outcome on an emotional level, and this spiritual journey, this evolutionary journey of getting somewhere and being something. It is fascinating. It is fascinating.
I'd like to, excuse me, I'd just like to say one more thing before we leave the idea of the stress. I want to just clarify from my perspective, the stress in and of itself, it's not good or it's not bad.
Right.
It simply is an experience. And it really doesn't even become stressful until we interpret the experience that way. Where we have problems is when it's unresolved. So I'd like to clarify for myself.
Yeah.
Say, this is what I found, and I think it's going to lead to where we're going in this conversation.
We'll see, right?
Yeah, unresolved stress is where the problems begin. But for many of us, the key is first we have to recognize that the stress even exists. And there are times in my life when I have had, or in some cases, even during this conversation, I'm still undergoing a form of stress. For example, with my mom, my mom's health is declining very quickly. Caught me off guard. I didn't see it coming in the way that it is coming. And when it began, I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't even recognize it at first. And it began to show up in my body and in my life in ways that were very unexpected for me. And as we all know, it usually happens at the most inopportune times. So the stress doesn't always come when we want it to come. Can I just give an example of that? Can I give an example of how stress doesn't come when we want it to come?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mentioned my father was an alcoholic. He left our family when I was 10, and I didn't know him very well. And he died on the first day. Actually, it was the first day of my book tour for the book, The God Code, the first book I had with Hay House.
One of my favorite.
When I was on the road, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I took a week off, and I went to be with his new wife, and we performed a service. But it was so interesting for me, Darren, I didn't feel the emotion around it. That I felt like I should. And I said, well, you know, I'm busy, I'm on the road, I'm on a book tour. So here's what I did. This is how inexperienced I was with this. This is a number of years ago. I took out my day timer and I found a week when I was not on the road. where I could be home in the privacy of my own home. And on my day timer, I wrote the words, grieve my father.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, I would come home and I give myself a week to grieve my father.
And then it's
so
done.
I came home, I waited and waited and waited, and not a damn thing happened for the whole week. And I thought, okay, I guess I'm over it. So one day I was in the shower alone, and I know we've all had this experience. It's very primal. Hot water running over the top of your head, and the solitude of being alone. And I just started, it wasn't crying. It was these deep, gasping, primal sobs. I mean, I almost couldn't catch my breath in between. And I thought, what in the world is going on? And I got out of the shower and I looked, and it was exactly a year to the day from the date my father passed. And we often hear that the grieving happens a year later. So the point of me sharing this is that is a form of stress. First, I didn't recognize it. Secondly, when I did, I believed that I had some control over it, that it would happen when I gave it time in my schedule. And what I found is the grief is going to happen when my body is ready. The question is, am I ready to process? Am I ready to embrace and to heal that grief in a healthy way? And that is, I think, a lot of what the stress in my life has been about. It's the loss of loved ones and not knowing how to deal with that. And I'm losing my mom now as she is declining through a process that she's losing her mind, her memory. Often she doesn't even recognize me. And I feel so blessed. One of the things I give thanks for every day is that my mom is still in this world with me. So I still get to hold her and love her and tell her that I love her and thank her for bringing me into this world, because I know that, and I can feel these, and I'm saying this to you, I know that there's a time not far from now in my life where I won't have that. So it's about recognizing the things that touch us deeply and embracing, I think, and acknowledging those things so that we can deal with them in a really healthy way. And this is a perfect segue for me. This is where LifeLine has come in for me.
Well, you're a lifeline, and just in sharing from your heart, I relate. My father is suffering with dementia, advanced Alzheimer's, and doesn't recognize anyone in the family. Just a really amazing, high-functioning man. So I really understand just the impact, and it's a unique kind of grieving and loss rather than somebody having a heart attack or, where it happens in this way. We lose them way before they actually stop breathing. And that is really powerful. And I so appreciate you sharing that. As much as we might have timing, that this universe is intelligent, and the synchronicity of exact time comparatively to the year before, there's patterns that exist in such significant ways that when we really are capable of processing our emotion, that energy that's moving us, when we're able to recognize with gratitude the interconnection, the value of it, that the emotion starts to move. And it's powerful, Gregg, because you're a New York Times bestselling author. You inspire and educate people with your programs all over the world.
Thank you for that.
It's truth. And it's to be able to eloquently express the raw emotion and reality of growing up in an alcoholic family, father, that aspect of trauma, the impact of low self-esteem, how it's affected other people in the family, to being a master in your life, to apply practices that are a healthy habit of being your authentic self. I have a personal question, and that is, for you, what would you say is your defining moment? Meaning, like, that transition time, like what happened, what didn't happen, where you all of a sudden, the light bulb, the light awakened in your heart and you started to live your life with a practice in a conscious way, living true to it. What would you say that there was a defining moment for you?
I would say there were a series of moments that gave me greater clarity each time something happened. But I think for me as an adult, I had some childhood experiences that certainly cast me into a realm, a way of looking at the world differently. I don't know how much time we have. Are we pressed for time here, Darren?
Whatever works for you, my brother.
I'll tell you. I'll just share this. I don't share it very often. When I was 5 years old, I didn't want to be in this world, and it was very painful for me to be in this world, and I was looking for ways to leave this world. And in the infinite creativity that we have as children, looking back, I'm always in awe of how we go about getting the things that we want. When I was 5 years old, I consciously took a toy that I had that ran on electricity, and I cut the cable to the toy so that I had an electric wire in my hand, and it was the dual electric wire, the positive and the negative. I split them in half. I took a pair of scissors. I cut off all the insulation, and I walked over to a wall plug. And I put one wire on one side and the other side, and I just hung on. And I was severely burned, as you can imagine. My eyebrows, my face, my hands. I literally shocked myself into seeing the world differently. And I had experiences that day that forever impacted the way that I have lived my life, in terms of being able to sense other beings present with me, even though they weren't physically in the room. That happened from shocking my body. But so those kinds of childhood experiences. But as an adult, and I'm not suggesting we need to go to some faraway, beautiful place to have the experience. We can do it in our living room. But for me, the experience, I think one of the defining experiences came, I'm trained as a scientist. I'm a degree geologist. I was working in the industry, in the corporations during the 70s and the 80s. And I took a trip to Egypt, and I consciously chose to spend the time to go and hike to the top of Mount Sinai at sunset. The physicality of the hike is a purification unto itself. And I wanted that for myself, and I was alone. And I've already mentioned the power of beauty in my life, and I knew that beauty, I would be changed in the presence of the beauty. I didn't know how. So I was sitting at the top of Mount Sinai as the last rays of the sun shot up over the horizon, and there's nothing there. It is a desert. There's no trees, there's no grass. It's you and the earth and the sky and God, and that's it. And as I saw that last ray of the sun over the horizon, the beauty touched me so deeply. This warmth welled up inside, and I asked a question that I'm going to invite every one of our viewers to ask at some point in their lives if they haven't already. And the question was simply this: if I left the world right now, if I were to leave the world in this moment, and I could never come back, and I look back on everything that I had given to the world, everything that I've accomplished in my life, would I feel complete? That was my question. And Darren, before I even got the question out in my mind, the answer was screaming from my heart. The answer was no, I wouldn't feel complete. And my next question is, what would it take to be able to say yes? If I ask this question again 30 years from now, what would it take for me to say that I've given what I came to the world to share, and that I've honored myself in this life? What would that take? The answers that came to me in that moment were, and still are my soul's compass. It's the yardstick by which I gauge every choice that I make in my life. And as an author, I know you have this as well, Darren. You're invited to do presentations here and there, and work with these people, and co-author these books, and do these films, and work on these research projects. And all of them are good. They're beautiful. However, which ones, if I say yes, are going to get me a little closer to my yes? Right. What would help me to feel more complete? And that was a pivotal moment for me, because based on what happened, now I knew the truth in my heart, but I had to find the courage in my life and the strength to make the choices. And I left the corporations. I left living in a large city. And every choice that I made after, even where I live right now, is it convenient? No. But I've lived around convenience all my life. Is it beautiful? Yes. That's what's important to me. So those kinds of things, that was a pivotal moment for me that happened years ago, but it's a moment that still plays a vital role in my life every day.
Mm.
Long answer to a short question.
Ah, man, I love it. I love it. I was at a friend's funeral, and I was listening to a rabbi give the eulogy, and you just triggered this memory in me. He started to talk about Moses climbing up Mount Sinai and going to the top, and here he is, and he hears this voice that speaks to him. This is what the rabbi says. And Moses goes, "Who is this?" And the voice says, "It's God." And Moses says, "Well, reveal yourself." And God says, "Well, I'm here. I'm this burning bush." And the rabbi says, Moses says, "You're a burning bush? Show yourself." "What do you mean you're showing yourself as a burning bush?" And the rabbi said that God said through the burning bush, "No one can see me and live. No one can see me directly and live." And in that moment, I'm just seeing like everything that you just said kind of come together. It's like through these portals, these perceived problems, these stressors, these circumstances in life, my mother dying, my father going through alcohol, different circumstances along the way, going 5 years of age, I want to figure out how to get out of here. And it's like, it's these moments that become a bridge to the calling, which is our most divine expression and authentic way of being that compass. Just triggered in me that memory, which really helps me to appreciate so much.
Well, thank you for that, Darren. So I'll share one thing. I've never shared this with anyone before in an interview like this. Coming down off of Mount Sinai that night, under the stars, I was coming down, and I noticed a man walking up the trail in the dark toward me. And he looked like an Egyptian man. He had really long hair. He had a long galabaya, and he was carrying a walking stick, and he had these little round John Lennon glasses. And he didn't come up and say, "Hello, how are you doing? Beautiful night," anything like that. He walked right up, and we stopped on the trail, and he looked at me and he said, "Sometimes you never know what you've got until it's gone from your life."
Oh
And then he just kept walking up to the top. And it was just the right words at just the right time for me. And what I learned from that, and I'm going to share this with our listeners today as well, I think there's a lot of truth in that. And when we lose a parent or we lose a loved one, there's so often so many things that we feel are unresolved because we never made the time to consciously check in with them and have the conversation. So it doesn't always have to be verbal, but it helps. And one of those things, and I practice this every day in my life, when you feel that you love someone, I think it's important to tell them you love them. It can be anybody. And I do this all the time. And I know it means different things to different people, but we meet people every day of our lives and we take them for granted. And if you just for a moment think about what would the world be like if that person wasn't here right now, or if that funny little quirk that always gets on my nerves isn't there right now, or if the way they address me in the morning, if that's not there right now, what would the world be like if those people weren't there? And all of a sudden we developed this really powerful appreciation for the uniqueness of all the people around us, and we have to love them for it. So I think it is important when we feel something in the moment, and people in our rational mind will say, well, it's not the right time. I'll do it another time. I'll do it later. You and I both know we've been to more funerals in the last couple of years than I have in my whole life. I think the time is when the universe taps us on the shoulder. We feel it in our heart. I think that's the time to share what we feel. I believe that personally.
I do too. And the reality is that the tapping is not subtle when we just listen and are open to listening. And, it's been such a incredible honor to teach with you and to travel with you. And because the LifeLine technique that I share with people, you've been instrumental in your work, your research, and what you teach as far as a foundation of the LifeLine and putting it into an action step to get to that subconscious part of ourself that is invisible and is knocking on our door, but we don't always recognize that those problems are portals to the next greatest version of ourselves, aligning us with our purpose, our calling. Would you mind sharing your experience with LifeLine?
Not at all. I've had multiple experiences of LifeLine. And again, I want to honor your time here. Are we okay on the time that you've allowed for this?
Yeah.
I think the most powerful experience I had with LifeLine comes from the experience that I've just shared. I'm having with my mother right now. So my mom is still with me. I'm losing her little by little. And that is impacting me in ways that consciously I had not allowed for in the past. So Darren, I'll give you a little history that you probably don't even know before you and I had our session. I was going through a time in the near past when my body, I'm a healthy man and I keep track of my health. In terms of, basic physiology. I mean, I track blood chemistry every year. I track, all those kinds of things. So I'm very in tune with my body. I know very quickly when something is not right. I was going through a time where my heart rate was elevated 24 hours a day. I couldn't get my heart rate down. My blood pressure was elevated. It was starting to show up in some of my vitals, like cholesterol was increasing and things like that. But it happened in just over a period of a couple of months. So it wasn't chronic, it was something situational. And I had no idea what it was. One night, my heart was beating so fast, so elevated, that I had my wife take me to an emergency room here in New Mexico. And everything checked out fine. Everything was good, except my heart rate was just racing like crazy. And the nurse came in to me and she said, "Your body is fine." She said, "What's going on in your life?" And, I couldn't really think of anything except I said, I had just visited my mom. And I said, I started to say, "I'm losing my mom." And before I even got the words out, I was in tears. I couldn't even say the words. And Martha looked at me, my wife, she was with me, and she said, "Well, now we know what's happening." And I thought, okay, so now I understand this. A few weeks later, I'm in Peru, and I am taking a group to Peru. I always go down early to acclimate myself and make sure everything is ready. When I got into Peru, what was happening before was happening about 5 times greater. And it was, so here I was in a foreign country, didn't trust any of the hospitals or medical system. I couldn't sleep. My heart rate was just right through the roof. I mean, it was, and it wouldn't stop. And I thought that it was going to compromise my trip and my ability to lead a trip into Peru. And my wife, actually, Martha, called your office and was the one that set up the time because of the time zones and everything. And you and I connected, Darren, in the privacy of my hotel room from the sacred valley of Peru and in the high Andes, just outside of Cusco. And you spent, I believe we were on the phone about 2 hours. And we went through the process, the LifeLine process. And even though I kind of knew at a high level what was happening, I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't know how to resolve. Obviously, it was a form of stress in my life. And I am in such awe. I am so deeply appreciative. Uh, and I have so much respect for you and the system. And as a brother, for you making time for me so that we could have this experience and you could help me through this time. We went through the LifeLine process, which actually was relatively brief. That 2 hours, it didn't take 2 hours to go through LifeLine. There were a lot of things going on around that. And in the process of the LifeLine, our bodies have a language of their own. And our verbal way of communicating may not, sometimes it does, but it may not always be recognized by our bodies. So what I discovered was that, and was the mystery to me, my mom was still alive. And so in my man brain is saying, she's still here. Why would you be grieving if she's still here? And what I discovered is that I'm losing her twice. I'm losing her as the person I've always known while she's physically in this world. And at some point, I will lose her again as she physically leaves this world. And I had never accounted for that subtlety. For me, what was a subtle shift. So I didn't know how to deal with that kind of loss while she was still here with me. You walked me through, led me through expertly this LifeLine technique. And the thing that I love, one of the things I love about it so much is it's not talk therapy. We don't have to go in and explore the history of what has happened and why it's happened. You've got this down to a science, and you have just nailed this. Boom, boom, boom. You ask a question, and you are able to interpret my body's response in a way that tells us where we go with the next question. And through a template, for me, it feels like a template of very clearly defined steps. We walk through this together while you lead me through it, while allowing me to have my experience. And at the end of that, while we were doing this, I could feel my heart rate settling to a normal rate for the first time in weeks while we were on the phone. It wasn't like call me in the morning and see how you're feeling. It was so immediate and so direct, real time, because we were actually communicating with my body in the language that my body recognized, not that my subconscious and my fear, my ego, my filters, and all my old patterns wanted that language to look like. This was the true language of my body for me personally. And by the time we finished that session, and I remember sharing with you, I was going to get a good night's sleep for the first night in weeks. I was confident that I would be able to be at my best, which is so important to me, to honor the people that were coming with me from all over 14 different countries, from all over the world, to share the beauty of Peru through my eyes. When we hung up the phone that night, I knew that I could keep my promise. And that meant everything to me. And what I haven't talked to you much since that time, after we've done that technique, what I learned from you, in the rare times when I feel those experiences happening again, I now know what to do with them, because part of the technique is creating the language in that session that my subconscious and my body will recognize, so that I can have that conversation with myself again, even when Dr. Darren may not be here. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm halfway around the world, I don't.
You've got a bat phone, my friend. You've got a bat phone. You've got it's like Commissioner Gordon and Batman. You can call me anytime, anywhere.
Well, so this was, I'm going to say this was my most recent experience of the LifeLine technique. I've had others that have been equally successful, but it wasn't a showstopper for me like this was. I mean, I literally was at the point where I felt like I couldn't do anything in my life but address my heart rate and my health, and that had to come first. And then it's the first time that had happened. It was interesting that it happened from a hotel room in the Sacred Valley of Peru, half a world away. And that's where it happened. And it all comes back to the significance that I was at that time giving to my experience with my mom and losing her in the way that I've always known her while she's still physically present in the world. So I want to just thank you again, Darren. Thank you isn't enough. I have such deep gratitude for your life's work that led to you recognizing these patterns and how to put them together in a way that can be applied so practically, so easily, so quickly, and so effectively. I mean, boom, 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 just like that. And that lasted, so my trip lasted almost 3 weeks. And I went through, it was one of the best trips ever. I felt better than I had felt for such a very long time. I usually feel pretty good. I felt even better than good. And that stays with me today. I still use the language that you and I developed. And I have to say, it is very few and far between. Rarely will those feelings ever come up. And when they do, not to the degree that they have in the past, because I now understand them, and I know what it is that I need to hear from myself, from my community of 50 trillion plus cells that make
There
up
you
Gregg.
go.
I know what that community needs from me now.
It's
So
it's
I,
powerful, and beyond, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to support you or anyone. And I've come to know that the body speaks the mind. It is a reflection of the mind, and that the mind being mostly invisible and subconscious, when those old memories that are not fully processed, when they get triggered, they're emotionally charged, and the signal of emotional charge, when the heart's beating in that way, creates chemicals that course through our body and create the physical reaction. And it's powerful that these symptoms and stress and dis-ease patterns literally are the reflection, the portal that says we now have an ability to show up in alignment and authenticity in a way that we never have before. And this is how the body speaks. And most people don't see stress in this way, are still discovering their calling, their own beauty for themselves, let alone the world around that has a lot of fear and pain that they're not able to discover, like Mother Teresa, that crack in the street where that flower grows through. And it's such a beyond a pleasure and an honor to be able to talk on such a intimate level with you, and for you to share, from your heart.
well, it's an honor to be able to do so, Darren. And I mean, nobody else is going to see this but you and me, right?
Yeah, that's it.
just you and me, and a few million of our closest friends.
Right.
But, so here's the thing, and I haven't had the opportunity to share this with you. I think we all know the pattern. When we have an experience in our lives, often we'll see it show up again in other people's lives.
Right.
I have a friend that I don't know the history of his family relationship, but was having very similar experiences. Didn't know what to do with him. And I'm not going to judge this as a right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm saying there are different paths of dealing with these issues. He chose a medical path. And the medical path, the way they will often deal with this, they recognize it's a signal from the mind to the heart. So the way that the medical community sometimes will deal with this is they will eliminate the nerve receptors in the heart that are receiving the signals. It's a little cauterization process that
An
they go through.
ablation, right?
Ablation, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And he's fine, and he said successful, and that was all I needed. And I completely support, respect, and honor that path, because that is what the path that he chose in that moment, and it has worked for him in his life journey. I have no way of knowing what his life journey really is all about, but I recognize it's so interesting because they happen so close together, very similar circumstances, and very different paths of finding a way to resolve it in our lives. So I think the more we understand about the intelligence of our bodies, and Darren, you say something to me all the time, that every experience that we have is a portal to understanding ourselves and our relationship to our bodies. And people say, yeah, they'll take down the notes, but when you really get to what that means, when you really, honestly, at the core of your being, really embrace every experience is an opening to a better understanding of who we are. My sense is the better we know ourselves, the better equipped we are to deal with whatever life brings to our doorstep. And you, my brother, have helped me to know myself in a way. It's not something that I go out and invite into my life, but I know that when that kind of sadness comes to me, that I can embrace it in a healthy way. and actually find joy in the process because I'm looking at it and sensing it in a very, very different way. And it's not about talking it through. It's about shifting something within me, these powerful subconscious connections from a language that begins even before we're born. And that, I think, is the science of the 21st and 22nd century.
Raising consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a very famous quote from a scientist. He said, if the 20th century was the year of exploring the atom and DNA, the 21st century is the year of exploring the heart and the subconscious mind. And I believe that that's true, because that is where our mastery comes from, and understanding how these powerful forms of energy work in our bodies, and how we have the ability. I'm going to be really clear. It's not about control or manipulation. It's about regulation, self-regulation, and influence. How do we influence those things in our lives? So I talk about LifeLine all over the world. And I talk about it in conferences. I talk about it with individuals. I talked about it with my friend who was having the experience. And I know that for some people, they're drawn to very different, their background predisposes them sometimes to different modalities of healing. But it's available for everyone. And I thank you for devoting your life to developing it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. That right where my pen is pointing over there, that is the template. That's the LifeLine technique flowchart right over there. And that is that step-by-step process that allows people to create that change. And it reminds you what you just said. Buckminster Fuller said that rather than fixing the problem, create a solution that makes the problem obsolete. And it's really about raising consciousness and influencing the heart to beat in an intentional way, and therefore biology, behavior are directly influenced. And I so appreciate how you are rocking it out in the world and living from a heart that is just radiating infinite love and gratitude. And it's really just, it's such an honor.
And it's good for me to hear that today. What you don't know is it's really good for me to hear that today. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you for your family. Thank your family for sharing you with us in all the ways they do in the world. And just whatever it is within you, Darren, when I get to interview you, I'm going to ask you the same question. What was your turning point? What was your pivotal moment that led you on this path? I don't know what that is, but I know that the world's a better place for you being in it. I am a better man for what you brought to my life, and I love you, my brother. I appreciate you tremendously, and I love you for who you are and all you bring to this world. Thank you.
I love you too, and blessings to Martha, and you keep shining bright.
I will. Thank you so much.
In infinite love and gratitude.
Infinite love and gratitude. Take care.
If you want to learn more about the LifeLine technique, be sure to click on the link below. It'll take you to 3 free videos that teach you about muscle reflex testing, how we're able to communicate in a laser-like fashion with the subconscious mind. Awesome. The triune brain theory, a deeper understanding of the role that the subconscious mind plays in our biology, in our behavior, and then the secret sauce of the LifeLine technique, infinite love and gratitude, the power of it. So thank you so much for being a part of this LifeLine Master Series, and be sure to click on the link below, and I'll see you on the other side. Keep shining bright. Infinite love and gratitude.